This time on Poll Hub, the biggest election in America this fall seems likely to be the race for New York City mayor. It currently pits a stunning come-from-behind Democratic primary winner, Zohran Mamdani, against the current mayor, Eric Adams, the state's former governor, Andrew Cuomo, and the red-capped Guardian Angels founder and radio show host, Curtis Sliwa. We've got brand new numbers to cover almost any likely scenario, so stick around. Then, since Mamdani is famously a Democratic socialist, we thought it might be worth looking at what Americans currently think about capitalism and how those thoughts might have changed over the years. Finally, what is the worst gift you ever received? Think about that one. There'll be a quiz at the end, and you'll be ready for our fun fact. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm JD Dapper.
I'm Mary Griffith.
I'm Lee Berghoff.
Well, we have brand new New York City poll numbers out regarding the mayoralty race. Among likely voters citywide, Zohran Mamdani leads with 45% of the vote, followed by Andrew Cuomo, who is running as an independent with 24%. Republican Curtis Sliwa receives 17%. And current New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who's also running as an independent, receives 9% of the vote. Now, Lee, there's been lots of talk about whether or not Adams and Sliwa will remain in the contest. What happens if one or both of them drops out?
The distance between the frontrunners, the remaining frontrunners, gets closer. The distance narrows, but that's good news for Cuomo. The bad news is he still trails Mamdani by 10 points. So the 21 advantage for Mamdani becomes 10. And so that's obviously still in the lead. And that's if both of them get out. And that's certainly not a conclusion at this point. Waiting around for other people to get out to narrow the field is nice for speculation, but isn't reality at the moment. And when it became reality, Cuomo still has his work cut out for him. The good news for Cuomo is that if there is a nice part to this, Mamdani still does not break 50% in that two-way. The bad news is there's a lot of folks undecided in that, and he doesn't have to get a big hunk of it. Bottom line, I think, Mary, as we look, dig down into the numbers, I find what's very interesting is that Mamdani's doing really, really well among the kind of folks he needs to do well in. In New York City, that's Democrats. And he's getting in the four-way 58%. Cuomo getting only 23% of Democrats. So it looks like the primary even more so. And to the question whether young people are still in Mamdani's corner, 64% say people under 30 plan on voting him. So his coalition from the primary, interestingly, has stayed pretty much intact as we head to the general. And Cuomo needs folks to get out, and he still needs clothes. Maybe the debates would help, but that's, again, he needs something to change the dynamics in the narrative of this race.
We also asked about the favorability of the candidates. How much of this is sort of a voting for Mamdani because you like him versus not voting for the other guys because you just don't?
I think it's a little bit of both. Among likely voters, Mamdani has a favorable of 52%, and despite efforts to taint his image, only 40% have an unfavorable view. Flip it to Cuomo, 39% favorable and 59% thumbs down. So Cuomo has got the highest negatives next to Mayor Adams, but Adams and Sliwa don't really figure in too much to the final calculations at this point in the race. If it's Cuomo Mamdani, the problem again for Cuomo is his negatives are sky high and Mamdani's not.
I think one of the biggest tells of the last week was Donald Trump saying he figured Mamdani's going to be mayor. That doesn't mean he's the greatest political prognosticator on the planet. Lots of people have lots of things to say. But so much of the talk of the last month or so has been who's going to get out and who's going to get them out. And Andrew Cuomo has been, the beneficiary of that to the extent that there's been a beneficiary. I don't think anybody's suggested he's the one who's going to get out and leave it to Eric Adams or Curtis Sliwa to beat Mamdani. On the other hand, being linked to Trump is certainly not a good thing in New York City. This is not a city where Donald Trump, who lived and grew up and built buildings, is particularly popular. In fact, he's decidedly unpopular. So I think it's pretty telling that he kind of thinks he's seen what's coming. I think in our poll, the one thing that really stood out to me was what you just hit on, which is favorability. Nobody likes Andrew Cuomo. Nobody likes Eric Adams. Nobody really knows or likes Curtis Sliwa. Not nobody, but the numbers aren't great. And Mamdani, for a politician in this era, has kind of really good favorability rating. People don't like politicians right now. I mean, they just don't. And I think that he is like a few others around the country in both parties who have kind of cut through, and for whatever reason, there's a lot of speculation about it, there's a lot of political punditry about it, for whatever reason, he has broken through, and in breaking through and being kind of unknown and a little bit untested, I think he has that advantage of coming in with a favorability rating, which is really kind of not something we see much anymore in politics.
I think that the old politics here, and if it's fair to say, is Cuomo's a lot younger still than I am, but doing the traditional campaign where you're beating the guy on the points, jabbing away, doesn't get at what the appeal is of some of these new generation politicians. And that is, we're going to shake things up and change things as they are. And with the economy numbers as dire as they are, and people thinking the city's headed in the wrong direction, which the poll shows, that's an appeal. And so quoting things he said in the past, Mamdani said, doesn't necessarily provide the tarnish, just like when Hillary Clinton was running against Donald Trump and Biden. Some of the rules that we have been guided by just don't seem to apply as much like they used to. So you have to sort of change with the times.
Jay, you mentioned that President Trump, believes that Mamdani is going to win. He's not alone. 63% of likely voters believe that regardless of whom they support, they think that Mamdani is going to be the next mayor of New York City. So what does that do for turnout? I mean, is it that if so many people think that he's going to win, or some folks going to stay home, or the folks are going to go and show up at the polls or vote early, or are they just going to show up?
Yeah, that's that million-dollar question in every election. In every campaign I ever covered, I remember at some point on election day, standing as the polls were still open, doing news live shots at 5 and 6, talking about, well, it's all going to come down to turnout. I mean, there could not be something I said more often, I think, in political coverage than that. And this one's interesting, though, because turnout is what shocked everybody in the primary. They were zero prime voters. They were voters who simply had not voted before, and a lot of them. This is something Donald Trump did nationally in elections, and Mamdani has done it now. And it is a little hard for me to believe that this kind of information being out there would cause the people who turned out for him in a primary to not turn out in a general. I may be wrong. It's total speculation, but Lee, that's just my sense. When you've motivated voters like that to show up, I just think they show up again.
Yeah, and he's doing well with other voters in New York City as well. It's not like he's getting clobbered with the other groups. So when Cuomo has an advantage, it's like narrow. Whereas when you look at very liberal and liberal voters in New York City, I mean, Mamdani is running up the score, and we know that that's where a lot of them are. The other thing I want to talk about here is over the weekend, Governor Hochul endorsed Mamdani. Not many of the elected Democrats have stepped up to the plate on that.
Well, leadership.
Yeah, the leadership, I should say, absolutely. The Hochul thing I find interesting. Usually endorsements, for me, don't carry a huge amount of sway here. But I think the Hochul thing, because he hasn't got any of those kinds of, it sort of credentializes him a little bit. Although I must say, Hochul's looking at a re-election campaign down the road. And this endorsement may do her more good than Mamdani in terms of getting her protected, insulated against a progressive like her lieutenant governor.
Right, because Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand are looking at re-election campaigns down the road, too. And if they aren't primaried from the left, I'd be a little surprised at this rate based on the reaction of them not, especially Schumer, not endorsing at this point.
Lee, just very quickly before we move on to our next segment, you mentioned that New York City residents are just not happy with the direction the city is going in. And when you look at the numbers, we see that 88% believe that New York City is not very affordable or not very affordable at all. And to compound that for perhaps New York City Mayor Eric Adams, they are not too happy with the quality of life in New York City either. 55% believe that it's gotten worse over the last year, and an additional 14% say that it has remained the same, and that's a bad thing.
Yeah, if you look back to 2000 nationally, and New Yorkers are not immune from this, I mean, everybody's in a change election mode. And so that's what we're getting. So it's kind of like an oddity of our history that Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders, and now Mamdani may have the same formula. Somebody who's going to shake things up for voters who are very dissatisfied with the way things are going.
One of the things that's notable about Zohran Mamdani is that he is a democratic socialist. AOC is as well, and of course we have a socialist in the Senate and have had one in the House or the Senate for decades. Bernie Sanders is the most recent one. So socialism isn't something that doesn't exist in America. It's just very, very rare that somebody calls themselves a socialist, even a democratic socialist. So we thought it'd be interesting to say, well, what are we? Well, we're capitalists. We're a capitalist country, right? What do people think about capitalism, though, when we start talking about a democratic socialist and opponents trying to brand him as, oh, he's a socialist, don't vote for him? So we went to the polls. Gallup has been asking about capitalism for some time. In 2016, 60% said they had a favorable view of Americans. So Gallup's been asking about the views of capitalism among Americans for some time now. In 2016, 60% had a favorable view of capitalism. In 2021, basically the same number, and it's down to 54% in their recent poll in 2025. Not a huge jump. But if you look at it another way, what about big business? Because capitalism in America is very tied to large corporations. That's different. The same Gallup poll asked these same questions in various years. Large businesses, big business, had a favorable view. Americans had a favorable view of that. 2019, 52%. It got down to 37% in this latest poll. So just barely more than a third of Americans have a good view right now of big business. So before we ask about that, we should ask about socialism, right? So they did. Gallup asked as well. And the favorable view of socialism hasn't changed. From 2019 to 2025, almost 4 in 10, 39% of Americans think socialism is a pretty good thing. So not a big change across this last almost decade or so in the views of capitalism versus socialism, but quite a decline in big business. Is that a distinction without a difference, or do you think that's something that's real? That big business and capitalism are actually seen as slightly different things in the minds of Americans?
No, I think that they get tied together. And I think the flip side of that is populism. And I think if you run against big business, not capitalism, but big business, you can score points. I think if you run on a socialist platform, you better have a certain electorate, like maybe New York City, to appeal to. But so I think there's overlap there. I wouldn't say they're one and the same, but I think certainly when it comes to the economy, there's a lot of dissatisfaction. And then that converts into the inequalities that exist economically. And that means big business is taking a hit there.
Well, I don't know necessarily if people equate the two consciously when they're talking about it. I think people are dissatisfied with perhaps their economic plight in life. They want something different. And it's just not working for them. I mean, we came out of the COVID-19 pandemic and people struggled. They struggled before that, and they don't necessarily see the light at the end of the economic tunnel. And so I think when you look at the system as it exists now, I think a lot of people are just striving for the opposite. They want something different. They want coming back to those kitchen table issues. They want something that works better for them personally.
Lee, is this, like we talked about in the last segment, how the rules of politics have really changed a lot. You used to hammer a candidate with what they said in the past, and it was a certain, you're done. If you said that in the past, you're done, and not really true anymore. Is that kind of the true with words like socialism? I mean, is it really like the kiss of death? I mean, maybe it is in Oklahoma, but is it even in a broad swath of the country, or is it just another word to people, you think?
No, I think, look, follow the bouncing ball, as they say. And if Mamdani becomes mayor of New York City, then you can certainly expect Donald Trump and others to say, and this is where the Democratic Party has gone. Now, they're not going to be saying that because they think they're complimenting them. They're saying that they have a step. And I think that is the kind of message that we can expect a lot of. That way, you are going to see changing vocabulary for sure. But to say I think the poll numbers show this very clearly, to say that it's going to be a pro-socialist movement, that seems to be very much in a certain swath of the electorate, the Bernie Sanders, AOC, Mamdani swath, and that still is limited in part, not because people have a great sense of what that may mean, but it certainly brings a negative association for a lot of people.
But how much of this is age and demographics coming into play here? I mean, I think the perception of socialism, and look at the New York City mayoralty race. Zohran Mamdani won the Democratic primary based on the youth vote. So how much of this is based on age or other demographics where there isn't perhaps a negative connotation with the term socialism?
Yeah, I think you hit it right there, is that socialism, if you grew up in the 50s or 60s or even 70s, socialism meant at best Sweden and at worst the Eastern Bloc or China or something like that. And I don't think it has that meaning for people who grew up in the 2000s or 2010s. It just doesn't have that same kind of feeling. Communism, on the other hand, and I think there's a big distinction here. Trump and others use communist like right and left. They call, Trump calls Mamdani a communist because he likes to interchange socialism and communism. I think he does strategically. I think politically and strategically, calling Mamdani a socialist, okay, whatever. You get a little rise out of the Fox News audience. Call him a communist and maybe you'll get more attention from outside. So I think a lot of this is demographic, and it'll be really interesting to see as the boomers kind of move off the stage and even Gen X begins to have less influence because of the size of the demographic. What is it going to look like for an AOC? What is it going to look like for some of the other progressives who have aligned with the Democratic Socialist Party or using socialism in their names? What is it going to look like for them when it's a different demographic and a different electorate looking at them?
That's a great question. And if the baby boomers move off the chart, I'm going to leave it to someone else to answer.
Well, I'm part of Gen X, so I really can't answer either.
And there's no one. We're going to have to next time bring our youth into this. But seriously, there's no doubt that equation is shifting. The question, as always, is will the Democrats also have a pragmatic side to them? Or are they going to allow the Republicans to paint them in terms that are beneficial to the Republicans? The Democrats don't necessarily become the beneficiary of this changing electorate. It's just an opportunity for some of them down the road. Not right now, but down the road. And so someone like AOC has a future in our politics and that kind of message more significantly. But that doesn't mean the Democrats are all of a sudden going to flip the country and create a new realignment based on this changing demography.
It is worth looking at those Gallup numbers, though, because they did break it down by age. And when you ask about, do you think do you have a positive or negative image? 49% of 18 to 34 had a positive image, 30% of people over 55. So that's a big jump. That's almost 20 percentage points. So I think we're onto something here. The demographics may prove to be destiny in terms of the word socialism. We'll see, but I think there's some chance that we will have a different view of it in the future. Americans will have a different view in the future than they do now.
If there's something that you could gift wrap in politics, there's no certainties anymore, but is that too big a stretch to the fun fact? Well, maybe. 1990, Gallup asked the national audience, has there ever been a gift that you got that you really want to give back? You don't really like it. Which kind of thing is the most jumps out at you as something you didn't like? Well,
worst gift ever, Lee. Cut to the chase here headline. Worst gift ever.
Worst gift ever. Because I didn't have a lot of things here, but clothing sort of takes it at 20%. Alcohol 18, food at 11, and nothing else breaks double digits. So I know why I don't have a lot of worst gift evers, because my birthday's in early May, and I start about March dropping
He's starting.
And a little too early. Yeah, but I dropped some hints out there. They're not too subtle. And so I can't actually think of anything I've gotten that I wanted to either re-gift or have to fake excitement over. And again, I like politics. I like sports. That opens up, certainly Yankee tickets. Anyone, that's the kind of thing I am.
We've quickly moved to the gifts you most want from worst gifts ever.
Well, there I go. I'm proving my point. I didn't telegraph it. Mary, ever something show up for you that you went, that's lovely, thanks, I got 3 of them?
Well, I mean, I can't really pinpoint a worst gift ever, but I will say that if I did have to, some clothes might come into that just because of the style. But I really think that when it comes down to a gift that perhaps I always appreciate the thought, mom taught me well, but I think that when it comes to a gift that I don't necessarily love, it's because that it's not that there isn't the thought in it, but perhaps getting a gift that the person who's giving the gift likes for themselves. or something along those lines, like an interest that they think will translate to you. And you're like, yeah, not so much. Jay, what about you?
Mary, I just to tease that I was going to give my mother a baseball glove for her birthday with that kind of rebound in mind. But Jay, why don't you jump in?
So I just am kind of shocked by the responses here. So clothing was number one at 20%. Alcohol was number two at 19%. The worst gift ever was alcohol. I mean, if you're an alcoholic, yes, that is a terrible gift, granted. But I'm not sure that's what people had in mind. 12% was perfume or cologne. And I kind of get that. That's very personal. It's like, wow, that's a horrible, horrible scent. But 11% is food. I mean, wow, that's harsh. Like somebody gives you food as a gift and you're like, this is the worst gift I've ever gotten. That is brutal. So I don't know. The others were kind of like flowers or houseplants, jewelry. But Lee, I thought you'd pick up on this one. 3% said tickets to entertainment or sporting events. The worst gift ever, not the best. Your best gift ever is a Yankees ticket. Yeah. 3% of these people, their worst gift ever potentially could have been Yankees tickets. Maybe they're Mets fans.
My best gifts are your worst gifts. So sports, well, thanks a lot, you'd say. Broadway musical, not so much. Food, you'd go for. You'd like some interesting kind of things.
I guess. I mean, but this, again, worst gift ever. I just think the answers here are really funny. And I can't think of a worst gift ever. I mean, I can think of some bad ones, but if I said them, I'd have to be specific enough that people might actually know. So I'm just going to, but discretion will be the better part of valor in this case. And I will say, I can't really think of a bad gift.
Let's see, now our student producers have maybe not gotten the number of gifts. Have you gotten any real lemons out of the deal?
My least favorite gift was, I was like 10 years old and I got it for Christmas. I just got a bunch of underwear and I remember looking underneath the tree and I was looking at all of my gifts and there was just like 10 pair of underwear and I'm just like, what am I going to do with that?
Is that one for each year? I mean, I don't know what that
Were there other gifts under the tree?
No, there was, but I just remember a lot of it being underwear and that was a rough Christmas.
AJ, do you have an underwear story too? What's your worst gift ever?
I don't know. I would say I find gratitude in all gifts. So I'm not going to say I've had a bad gift. I will say with food, I understand why people said that because I feel like it's an easy one to miss if someone doesn't know you that well.
So they give you something that you just really hate.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of truth in that because you get presents usually from people who know you and you sort of have an idea as to what's a loser when you're buying a present, unless you get into the trap Mary identified where you really give something you like to someone else. Mary, you're going to jump in.
Well, yeah. I mean, I actually gave one of the boys' teachers a box of nice chocolate for the holidays. And then I found out after that he's allergic to chocolate. And I felt awful. I mean, how was I supposed to know that?
Regift.
That is funny.
It was a good box of chocolate, too. Yeah. I would have kept it.
Well, if our friends and relatives have been listening to this segment, this has been very insightful on do's and don'ts. Keep away from the underwear. I think that probably is going in the wrong direction. But I think that will leave it right there for this week. And we'll catch up with you next week.
That'll do it for Poll Hub this week.
Poll Hub is produced by the Marist Poll at Marist University in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer.
Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
The Poll Hub team includes AJ Cambino, Tommy Rogers, and Cassidy Connors.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, consider telling a friend about us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal accessible from our website.
Remember, you can always tell your smart speaker to play Poll Hub, and with any luck, it'll cooperate.
Finally, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button. Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcasting app as soon as it's released.
We'll see you next time.